There's a version of this story that most people never heard. It does not begin with a camera or a contract. It begins in a desert city, in a classroom, with a young woman who thought she was going to spend her life translating ancient Greek and arguing about free will. The world had other plans. By the time Rebecca Romney walked into the gold and silver pawn shop on a Las Vegas afternoon and looked down at a stack of Civil War documents, she had already become one of the most quietly formidable figures in the rare book world, and almost nobody knew it. What followed was 4 years of television fame, a scandal involving federal agents, a disappearance with no explanation, and a second act that turned out to be more extraordinary than the first. This is the full story, and most of it has never been properly told. Phoenix, Arizona is not a city associated with rare books. It is a city of heat and highways and strip malls that stretch to the horizon. Rebecca Romney grew up there, and nothing about her early life suggested she would one day be appraising Shakespeare folios worth millions of dollars. As a teenager, her passions ran toward ideas, not objects. She loved philosophy. She loved languages. She once said, in her own words, that old books struck her as boring things for boring people. That changed the moment she committed herself to actually learning. Between 2003 and 2007, she studied philosophy and classical studies at Brigham Young University. And she did not approach it casually. She taught herself 5.5 languages during those years: English, French, Japanese, Latin, Ancient Greek, and a working knowledge of Old English by studying for stretches that would exhaust most students. She graduated with honors and wrote a thesis comparing 2nd century Greek manuscript fragments of Plato's Republic. The work required her to read Plato not in translation, but in the original hand, comparing how those ancient ideas had physically survived on papyrus across millennia. She was 22 years old. The practical result of all that preparation revealed itself in a moment of accident. In 2007, fresh out of university, she applied for what she believed was a management position at Bowman Rare Books in Philadelphia. She had misread the posting. The job was for a rare book specialist. She had no experience in the field whatsoever. Most people would have excused themselves, offered an apology, and left. Instead, she sat down, admitted she knew nothing about rare books, and made her case on the strength of what she did know: ancient texts, manuscript culture, the physical life of documents across history. She got the job. Within months, she was handling materials most collectors never see in a lifetime: a leaf from the Gutenberg Bible, first editions of Newton's Principia Mathematica, a Shakespeare First Folio from 1623. The learning curve was extraordinary, but her background gave her something that most rare book dealers simply do not have: a deep understanding of how documents age, how inks and papers behave across centuries, and how forgeries reveal themselves through anachronism. She had essentially been training for this work without knowing it. By 2010, she had been promoted to gallery manager in Las Vegas. By 2013, at 29 years old, she became the youngest senior director in Bowman's history, overseeing catalogs, auctions, and private sales worth more than $10 million a year. Rick Harrison did not find Rebecca Romney through a casting call or a talent agency. He already knew her. When Bowman Rare Books opened a Las Vegas location, she was running it. And the world of high-value antiques and collectibles in that city is smaller than people realize. Their paths crossed at local events and through mutual contacts. Rick had been operating the gold and silver pawn since 1989, and he had developed a genuine collector's instinct over decades. When items involving paper, documents, signed books, historical manuscripts started coming through the shop with regularity, he needed someone who could look at them the way a doctor looks at a patient, with diagnostic precision. He called her directly. Her first appearance on Pawn Stars came in April 2011, during the show's 4th season. The producers handed her a collection of Civil War-era papers that included a Confederate bond from 1861. In less than 10 minutes on camera, she identified a forged signature that dropped the item's value from several $1,000s to almost nothing. The cameras caught all of it: her composure, her systematic process, the way she cross-referenced details without visible agitation. Viewers had seen experts on the show before, but something about her manner was different. She did not perform expertise. She simply exercised it. Ratings for that episode climbed by 15%. The network took notice. Producers took notice. And something important happened in the viewer response. People wanted more of her specifically. Not more books, more her. What followed was a sustained run of appearances that made her one of the most recognized figures in the rare book world beyond the academic and collector circles, where she had already built her reputation. Between 2011 and 2015, she appeared in around 30 episodes, with her most concentrated presence in the first 4 years. The range of material she handled on screen was extraordinary. A first edition of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species, worth upward of $75,000. A first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, valued at $20,000. Broadside printings of the Declaration of Independence. 19th century documents connected to the slave trade. Notes linked to Edgar Allan Poe that had been hidden inside what appeared to be a worthless manuscript. One of the most celebrated moments came when Chumley, the show's lovable, frequently imperiled employee, bought a signed copy of Charles Lindbergh's 1927 memoir without verifying the signature. Rick Harrison told him, on camera, that if the autograph turned out to be fake, his next day off would be permanent. Rebecca was called in. She produced a verified comparison sample and walked through how Lindbergh's signature had evolved as his fame grew and public access to him changed. The signature was authentic. She valued the book at $1,500, triple what Chumley had paid. She had saved his job with a handwriting analysis. Another episode brought in what a seller claimed were Revolutionary War bonds. Rebecca recognized immediately that they were not revolutionary at all. They were Confederate, issued in the final years of the Civil War. More than that, she traced them to a documented category of stolen Southern assets that had gone down with a ship called the USS Republic, which sank in a hurricane in 1865. The wreck was discovered in 2003. Some of its corroded contents, including financial documents, had been recovered, and their ownership status remained legally unresolved. The bonds could not be purchased without risking a lawsuit. Her research stopped the shop from making what could have been a catastrophic mistake. Her fans started calling her the Book Whisperer. Viewer forums filled with requests for a spin-off. Some of her calls, like exposing a fake Shakespeare First Folio by detecting anachronistic paper aging and ink quality, demonstrated a forensic level of analysis that simply does not come across through television in ordinary circumstances. She made it look inevitable. In 2014, an episode aired that would quietly begin the strangest chapter of her story. A seller arrived at the shop with a copy of the 1841 edition of the Book of Mormon, a genuinely rare object with the documented collector market. Rebecca examined it carefully and placed its value at $40,000. The seller wanted $100,000. After negotiation, Rick Harrison purchased it for $24,000, which looked, on the surface, like a clean deal. Then the whispers started. The book, according to accounts that spread through online forums and documentary-style YouTube videos in the following months, was allegedly stolen from the Marriott Library at the University of Utah. Federal agents were said to have seized it from the pawn shop not long after the episode aired, leaving Rick with nothing and no public explanation. No official statement was ever released. No charges were made public. But the story spread, and it spread fast. According to those same accounts, Rebecca was questioned by federal investigators who wanted to understand how a stolen historical item of that significance could move through a nationally televised transaction without triggering any alarms. She was never accused of any wrongdoing. The questioning, if it happened as described, was framed around institutional process, not individual culpability. But the timing of what came next has never been fully explained. On January 10, 2015, Rebecca Romney appeared on Pawn Stars for what turned out to be her final episode. She appraised a pirate book from 1734 and placed its value at $1,000. Rick bargained it down to $400. She left the frame, and then she simply did not come back. There was no announcement. The History Channel offered no explanation, no farewell episode, no official statement from the production, no goodbye segment. One of the most popular recurring experts in the show's history vanished from the screen as quietly as a chapter ending mid-sentence. What made the absence stranger was what she did not do. She did not remove Pawn Stars from her LinkedIn profile. For years after her disappearance from the show, she continued to list herself as the program's rare book expert. Some observers concluded it was simply professional marketing. She was known because of the show, and the association had value. Others believed it pointed to a non-disclosure agreement that prevented her from explaining publicly why she left. Neither explanation has ever been confirmed. The fan forums of 2015 generated theories that ranged from the plausible to the absurd. Some believed the Book of Mormon scandal had poisoned the relationship between her and the production. Others argued the show itself was changing. There had been growing criticism at the time about staged appraisals, manufactured drama, and the gap between what television presented and what actually happened in the shop. Some fans believed the show had become something Rebecca no longer wanted her name attached to. What she did say, in the months that followed, was almost nothing about the show at all. She had moved to Philadelphia. There was a promotion at Bowman Rare Books. She was taking on a larger role overseeing library acquisitions and catalogs at a national level. It was a credible explanation. It was also, to the people watching closely, conveniently timed. Whatever the reasons for her departure, what Rebecca Romney built in the years that followed suggests the television chapter was only ever a small part of her story. In 2016, she married J.P. Romney, an author and historical researcher who shared her obsession with the printed word. The following year, the two of them co-wrote a book together, Printer's Error: Irreverent Stories from Book History, published in March 2017. The book runs nearly 400 pages and covers forgotten corners of printing history. Forged editions of Galileo's work, Charles Dickens waging copyright battles in the 1840s,